Welcome back for another episode of Strive for 25. Joel Farrell here, and looking forward to sharing.
Strive for 25 here with another episode on the podcast. Joel Farrell here, and I've got a really cool guest today, Dr. Josh Waddell, and we're going to dig into some really cool stuff when it comes to building wealth, the mechanics of the mind and the brain and the how and the what. And I just can't wait to dig into this stuff with you. And we had some really cool conversations in the past on this, so I just can't wait to dig deeper on it. But on this channel, we talk about building wealth, right? Taking, wherever you are today, whatever level you are in building wealth, wherever you are in your journey, some people at the very beginning, some people in the middle, some people later in the journey. And if you want to get to the next level, you're talking about, a change in behavior, and changing behavior is not easy. It's hard. If it were easy, everybody would be doing it and we all be happy and successful. But the best know how to harness the power of the mind and to be able to get to where they want to go. So, Josh, I want to introduce you. If you want to kind of just tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit of background.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Josh Waddell. I'm a psych nurse practitioner, working out of San Rosa Beach. I work out of a clinic in Defuniak Springs. I've been in mental health for over 10 years, doing a lot of different things, from like case management in rural Tennessee to being a therapist to prescribing medicine. So just a lot of different roles. I got my doctorate from Vanderbilt University, so I was there for a couple of years and learned a lot there. Before that, I was at Tennessee Tech University in Cookeville. But the psychology of money is very interesting. I think one thing that's important, I want to say a lot of things. I probably don't do all these things, right. And I probably need to take my own advice on some of these things. But I definitely can unpack that a little bit, and excited to learn a little bit more with what you have to kind of bridge on top of it.
Cool. And just real quick for the listeners out there, you do have some of your own stuff that you put out there in the podcast world, right? Can you share
correct.
That name real quick, just so they know where to find you?
Yeah. So I host a podcast. It's called Mental Maps. You can follow us at Mental Maps Podcast on Instagram. We really just unpacked all things related to mental health, all the different concepts, why do brains get sick, how to make your brain better, how to make your brain well, all these different things. So definitely check it out. Connect with us on Instagram. We love your feedback. And so it always helps me guide that the more feedback I get. So definitely check it out.
Cool. So, the psychology of money, right? I mean, can you kind of give our listeners a little bit of an explanation of what that's all about and kind of where that kind of leads into?
Yeah, I think, the first thing to start out is like, what is money? And so every society needed something to be able to use that was international, that was universal. Prior to that, we were just bargaining. So if you had a piece of food and I had some water, I'd trade you my water for food and vice versa. And so later on, tribes and cultures began to form this like universal financial system. And from then, it's just grown and grown and grown to what we have today in our society and around the world, with just this major universal system that is somewhat hijacked, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the mind has been somewhat hijacked with the money. So it went from being able to, I have this and I want this, to you need all of these things. And if you get all these things, then you're going to find happiness and you're going to find contentment and you're going to find joy. And so money went from being able to get me my basic necessities to bring me happiness and bring me joy and bring me peace. And so that's where we've seen the shift in money from being just this basic survival need to be able to get the things that you needed to live, to now just this happiness seeker.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, you go from however many hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands of years ago, before you have this actual fiat money or silver or gold or whatever the actual trade is. And so you're saying, hey, I've got hay, or I've got, food, and I need, shawls or clothing, and we're going to make a trade. So you're trading for something that you actually need, right? Mm-hmm. So now you have this middle ground, this medium that has now become something that we idolize or want or need, et cetera. So from a mental standpoint, tell us more about kind of that money being the thing that we want, and what does it actually do to the brain, and how does it all fit together?
Yeah. So I think, money as a value system initially is, I can obtain X, Y, and Z because I have this. So if I have $20 and something costs $20, I can obtain this for $20. and when we think about it from a basic needs standpoint, like if I'm hungry and I go out and I buy my food, I have that money, that's great. But then what you found was that the more money we got, the more things we could obtain. And then once our basic needs were met, then we could obtain things that aren't really basic needs. And so the brain begins to find itself seeking other things outside of basic needs with its money. And so I think one of the biggest ways you see this is the difference in commercials. So this is a great discussion in like the 50s and the 60s. Primarily all the commercials you've seen were really about my product is better than this product. So this toaster has 3 levels of heat where this one has 2 levels of heat. Now we see it as this. If you look at every commercial you watch, it always ends with somebody smiling and they're happy. And because I got this product, it's happy. And so what that's done to our brains is it said that all of these things can bring us happiness. And so then that leads us to being able to put a higher value in our brain on the product. And so ultimately we spend maybe even more than we have because that the concept of happiness from this product outweighs how saving can give us happiness.
Okay. So, and this is just part of our society here. I mean, are there any, as a person that takes a step back and thinks about this stuff, you know, what positive, negative, indifferent effect does this have on the everyday person as we go through our journeys?
Well, I think you probably see it in your field, you know, with just in the concept of saving and being able to hold on to money. So, you know, your brain is constantly making this decision of what holds more value. And so if you're out in the desert and you have the difference between a heater or water, you're going to pick water because the value is I need that water. That's what's going to save my life. And that's these basic innate value systems that our brain holds dear. But in the world of money, what we find is that what does hold value more? So for example, does saving hold value to me for this delayed gratification, or does obtaining this thing right now for this small dopamine elevation that's going to bring me this product hold the most value? And so I think all day long, everything, whether you have $10 or $10,000, you're making these decisions on a daily basis of what's going to bring you the most value.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think of an example. So, you know, I was talking to somebody in their early 20s. She's a banker, and we're just talking about just all kinds of things. And she's got a budget already made out, and she's got numbers that she knows she has to be able to spend money on, you know, for her kind of her personal spending. And you know, we're talking about the things that happen that puts somebody out of their budget or puts her out of the limits that she puts on herself. And, you know, when you're in your early 20s, you know, your network is probably bigger from your school network. And, you know, she's telling me about, she went to a birthday get together with some of her friends from college that came in town, and, you know, people were buying shots. And so you get the rush and you pull out your credit card and you're buying shots with the groups, and it goes and goes and goes. And next thing you know, you wake up the next morning like, shit, I spent $200 at the bar last night. That's more than my allotted budget for XYZ. And it's like, those are the little things that happen, you know, weddings happen, you know, bridal showers, parties. I mean, all these things, you know, come out of nowhere, out of our normal routines. And, you know, we go with our emotions sometimes. So like, you know, when we talk about kind of breaking these things down, you know, you have your stuff that you plan for and the things that happen and pop up that, you know, come out of nowhere. So from a biological background, you mentioned, you know, dopamine hits, right? Like that quick fix dopamine hit. Like how does all that fit together when you're talking about somebody trying to save and stick into a budget, for example, and then things that happen maybe out of nowhere or planned or whatever that takes somebody out of that level of being able to hit their goals when it comes to saving?
Yeah, I think, you know, the example you talk about, I think we've all been there, right? In college, especially like after a big win or something, you're hanging out with your friends, like you're spending that money. Next thing you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But one of the things that occurs with money is that and there's some really great research that discusses this, is that our brain can say, well, this is just a one-time thing. So this is the only night I'm ever going to be out with my friends, with all these people around me on this day with this music playing, and I'm more willing to spend that more money because the value holds a higher value for the experience rather than savings. And so it's really different. Now, granted, in that situation, you're inebriated. And so maybe your frontal lobe's not working the way we need it to work to make those good rational decisions. But when you talk about dopamine, so Dopamine's a very interesting neuromodulator. So it's a neurochemical in the brain that does a lot of different functions. But one of the things that it does is it generates like happiness and motivation. It generates energy. It generates excitement. And so when we can get these things really quickly, the brain likes that because it doesn't take a lot of resources to obtain it. So even though it's better to have this delayed gratifications and work for it, and ultimately that's healthier for you, the brain will prefer at times to have these very short hits, or what we call elevations, just to be able to achieve it without burning a lot of resources for it. So when you talk about like a good example, you get on Amazon and you're about to go click out of your cart, and the next thing you know, something else pops up. It's like, oh, because you looked at this, get this. Well, okay, yeah, I think I want that too. Click, and you got it. And then dopamine elevation, and then it falls, and you're like, oh, what have I done? And so I think it goes back to the value system we talked about earlier of what does your brain hold to the most value? What is the highest importance? And if you can train your brain to do that, you can get to a place where you have way more self-control than constantly seeking out these small dopamine elevations to live on.
Okay, so man, that whole thing you just said, there's a lot to unpack there. So training your brain is one thing that probably goes into a lot more. And then you mentioned, oh my goodness, this thing pops up. Oh yeah, I do want that. Click on this, even though you didn't intend to buy it originally. Now you're clicking the button and buying it in your cart. You finalize it, and then I guess maybe a little bit later you say, oh shoot, why I didn't need that. Okay, I guess I already got it. And then people feeling remorse about it probably, and then moving on, like that whole process, right? Like it comes and goes. We do it, and then you feel remorse about it. I mean, that happens to everybody, right? It happens to all kinds of people, right? That in the moment you do it, and then maybe feeling remorse about it. The buyer's remorse, is that the right verbiage? Buyer's remorse.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And so, yeah, if we want to go down this dopamine pathway, Dr. Amy Lemke, who's done a profound amount of work in addiction and dopamine, she references this a lot of what goes up must always come down. And the higher it goes, the farther it falls. So if I get this small up of dopamine, so I feel good, I'm excited I've done it, there's always going to be a down for that. And when it goes down, that's that remorse, that shame, that guilt, that hurt, that almost withdrawal feeling that you have for what you've done. And for some people, that shame and guilt and hurt will perpetuate this need to do more because I don't like the way this feels, so I need to go do something else. So the people who find themselves even spending more and more and more money, who may like go to the bar one night and then they go the next night and the next night and the next night because they're trying to make themselves feel better from this experience. And I think it happens on really small occasions, such as just like the Amazon example, but I think it happens on much larger occasions as well, as people who make these very irrational, illogical decisions with money that doesn't make a lot of sense, to just constantly perpetuates their need to not feel that shame and guilt.
Okay. So if you're talking about then, hey, you know what? I recognize that there may be some things I want to improve on. You're telling me I can train myself on this stuff. So the more aware I am of this, the more I understand the process and logistics of this biology. Does that mean that I have a better chance of being able to harness and control and train myself to be able to use it to a benefit? And then what is the benefit? What's the end result?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things you see is first, and I'm sure you do this a lot in your work, is just creating awareness of like, what am I doing with my money? And is this really the most important thing for me? When you look at the psychology of money and the research that comes from it, it always starts with make a spreadsheet. I think every research reference is always like, start with making a spreadsheet. Like, where are you spending your money? And then what does your brain hold as the highest value? And when you're thinking about how to create this value system in your brain, it's being able to say, what do you hold dear? So what values do you hold dear? Is it safety? Is it risk-taking? Is it adventure? And then being able to cater your budget to that, to where you're not attacking your own values. I'm sure you see this, but how many people struggle to maintain their budget because it goes against their value system? So even though you're like, hey, you really need to save this money, it's like, man, but I really just want to adventure for the next 3 years. I really just want to like YOLO it for the next couple of years. And it's really difficult to see that. But if you can find a way to put value on the savings, which could allow you to live more adventure later on in life, maybe you can begin to train your brain to think differently.
Interesting. Okay. So create value, put more value to saving money, the actions it takes to saving money. So tell me more about that. So if I want to be able to try to, place more value on that, what are some of the things that I should be thinking about or doing on a daily basis to be able to put more value on something if it's not naturally easy to do?
Absolutely. So I think, the first thing is being able, and, I think we talked about this before, is just being able to fuel yourself. You're talking about the concept of self-control, which is to a point in our society very easily hijacked because, as we discussed earlier, with those dopamine elevations. And so our value systems can be very distorted because of these really easy ways to spend money. And so you've got to be able to fuel yourself. So step one is ultimately having a goal, but then being able to fuel yourself every day to have the self-control. So we talk a lot on mental maps about the brain gas tank and just being able to fuel yourself every day. So you're doing things every day to fuel your brain, to fuel your emotions, to fuel your thoughts, so that as these things occur, those ads happen, you have a bad day and you come home and then you pop open Amazon and there's all these things on there, or you go by the store and you want to do window shopping and now that credit card's burning a hole in your wallet. Those are the types of things where you need that self-control. And so if you are emotionally fueled, you can have better self-control compared to someone who's walking around on an empty gas tank, burnout, tired, and really easily looking for those dopamine elevations like we talked about.
Okay. So if I'm emotionally fueled, if my gas tank is filled up emotionally and not empty, then I'm less likely to be then kind of going off of our subconscious actions of go buy something to have a quick fix. Is that
Absolutely.
what you're saying?
Absolutely.
So how do I emotionally stay filled up? And I'm sure it's different for everybody. What's an example of that?
Yeah, I think so. It's the person who is able to, whether it's reading or meditating or yoga or working out or going on walks or having that alone time with their partner or going to the beach or getting outside, whatever is it that fuels you, you're doing a little bit of that on a daily basis. And then at least once a week, you're doing it on a larger scale. So maybe I go for that run on that Saturday. And so you're able to do these things on a regular basis to constantly fuel yourself. Now, the spin on that is everything you do costs something. And so that's going to cost you something. So that's going to cost you, maybe you go to bed a little bit earlier and you wake up a little bit earlier to go to the gym. Or maybe instead of watching Netflix for 2 hours or scrolling on your phone, you're consistently reading that book or journaling or doing something like that. But if you do that, you're going to find yourself able to take the hits that we as humans take in our society today on a daily basis.
Okay. So this is making me think of something that's been in my own journey, and some that follow me on Instagram at strive25_ may have seen this at the early part of this journey. Because this podcast wasn't a reality on July 12th when I started the Instagram channel. But long story short, running a mortgage branch, I have twin boys that are 3 and they're crazy, and a lot of big goals I have, do real estate stuff going on the side. And I'm like, man, oh man, I get to 7:30 or 8 o'clock and, go through my morning routine with the kids and then work and then dinner and bath and then bedtime by 7 or 8 o'clock. I'm exhausted. I'm done. And it's like, well, shoot, you can probably put an expletive there because I'm exhausted. I know that I have work to get done, that I want to get done, but I can't even mentally get myself to the point where I can log back into my computer and work for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. And the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of the things he talks about is the 2-minute rule. And for whatever reason, it just really hit home for me. It's like, okay, well, if I could just log in for 2 minutes and that be the minimum threshold and take the pressure off, I can do 2 minutes, shoot. And so I did that. And then certain days, you feel better. So you keep on going. And there are a couple of days where I felt like crap. And I was like, dude, I'm doing my 2 minutes and that's it. I did that for a week or two. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't a struggle. There was no anxiety. There was no second guessing myself or no doubt. It just became part of the routine. I was just doing it. It was easy. And that's literally the reason why we're even here talking, by the way. But the biology, how does that happen? So please tell me. I'm so curious. How does that work?
So I think one of the big things is, the old adage, if we all remember it from science classes, neurons that fire together and wire together. And so consistency is really important for the brain. The brain longs for this, what we call allostasis. So not true homeostasis, meaning that nothing ever changes, but that it can always adapt to change and it can predict what's occurring. And so when you're constantly doing something on a regular basis, the brain can prepare for that. And so as the brain prepares for that, it's going to be more likely to keep doing it because it's not going to take that much resources to manage that. So if I'm constantly opening my computer every night between 7:30 and 7:45, and I do that every day for a couple of weeks, the brain has already allocated the resources to manage that on a daily basis. So it's much easier to do that. Whereas if you only do it once a week, once every 2 weeks, it's harder for the brain to get geared up and dedicate those resources because you're just so gassed. And I think that's the biggest thing. But also, it's something, for you, like what value did you put on that? Like, what value did you see in giving those 2 minutes for you?
So on July 12th,
yeah,
a tremendous amount of value. On July 11th, not as much,
yeah.
but some.
Yeah.
Like if I go backwards in time, it was a process to get there. It was a process of days and weeks, and it was just going on my brain, probably years, to be honest. And then all of a sudden it's like, just snapped, like, this is what I got to do. And I did it. So like, and then like going back to the value part of it, like there's all kinds of things that are going through that we are thinking about coming across. Should I do that? Should I work on that? No, yes, no, maybe I spend a day on that. It's not worth my time. And it's just amazing that our brains are able to digest all this data and sensory information and then decide, yes, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to bypass and do something else. Like it's just crazy how that all works.
It is very, very interesting. And I think that, going back, we maybe could have started with this too, but we talk a lot about this on mental maps, is that the brain does two things all day long. And all it does is make predictions and create meaning. So I'm making predictions about what's occurring, and I make meaning based on what's occurring. So for example, the most innate things, if I'm walking through the woods and I see a bear, that meaning is this thing could kill me. And so or I'm scared, and the prediction is it could kill me, so I need to run away. And so I'm constantly making these predictions. The brain wants to be able to predict everything or most things because it allows it to adapt and manage its resources on an effective manner. And so I think that's one of the ways it wants to run subconsciously. The brain would prefer to run subconsciously. It takes a lot less resources to run subconsciously. And so as you're doing things on a regular basis, it becomes this quote unquote habit, this thing that you're doing regularly, and you don't have to consciously think about it as much. Like my wife and I, we both wake up very early to go to the gym Monday through Saturday. So we get up 4:30 Monday through Friday, and then a little bit later on Saturday because the gym doesn't open till later. And when we first started doing it, it was out of necessity because we couldn't get through traffic. We were living in Nashville at the time. And then now it's just kind of habit. If I didn't wake up at that time, my day would feel so weird. Like I didn't do the things I needed to do that morning. And so it's all about just getting that habit so that the brain subconsciously is like, yes, I've already allocated the resources for this.
Okay. So the brain allocates the resources to it, the energy of some kind to it. And then over time, it becomes easier and easier. And use the word prefer. Like this is all foreign language to me. Can you explain more about that? The picking and choosing and resources and energy and why it's like, how does that all work?
Yeah. So, I think one of the best ways to see it is the brain is constantly making decisions all day. So we only have X amount of resources to give on a daily basis. And when I say resources, I'm talking like nutrients, and nutrients being like caloric intake compared to caloric usage. I'm talking about blood. I'm talking about oxygen. I'm talking about all the things that are occurring biologically for the brain. And so it's saying, how much of this do I need to survive today? We know that there's a basic amount needed just to function the human body. And then from there, it's how much do I want to push forward. And so the brain is going to prefer, meaning it's going to set a higher value to something that's not going to take as many resources because it doesn't know if it's going to have those resources later. And it's always self-preserving, meaning that it wants to ensure that if you were to run up on a bear, you're going to be able to run away. That's something that's really important. That's very evolutionary based in the human body and also in other mammals as well, is that it's always conserving to save yourself. And so if you are doing something on a regular basis, it's more likely to prefer to do that because it knows already how many resources it's going to need.
Okay. So the brain makes a algorithmic choice of how much resources it's going to need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then operates based off of that prediction of how much resources and nutrients it's going to need. So when July 11th hit, right, I wasn't doing my nighttime habit, and 8 o'clock hits, I'm exhausted, or I'm telling myself I'm exhausted. So I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, scrolling on my phone, on Twitter or whatever, and I'm exhausted. And then the next day, I'm on my computer at 10 o'clock and I'm not exhausted. Like, it was literally the next day. How is one day here and the next day almost the exact same set of circumstances, literally the same set of circumstances, but I was thinking differently about it, and now I have energy.
Well, I think
how does that work?
I think it's one of the situations where you were consciously making that effort to be able to say, this is important to me. And maybe it wasn't important on July 11th, but maybe something happened on the 12th, or maybe just within your own self-work and evaluating. I think we all do this of like, this is what I want to do. It's the same reason people walk into the gym. People talk about going to the gym every day, but one day they wake up, they're like, I'm going to the gym. I'm going to walk in there and do that work. And it's one of the situations where the brain has just made that decision of, okay, this is what I've got to do. I've got to make this importance of my value system.
So if I consciously tell my brain that I value this over and over and over and over and over, and don't stop, at some point in time, chemically in the brain, the body, something will click, and I'm going to just go do it and have the energy to do it and fulfill that task.
Absolutely. I think you're talking about neural connections wiring together. So if I'm constantly doing the same thing over and over, those neural connections are constantly wiring together. They're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, one of the things that's really important is that, your emotional gas tank, your diet, exercise, all these things will impact how those neural connections grow. So some people just grow neural connections better because they're working out, they're doing things, they're being active, they have a healthier lifestyle. But even if you're not doing any of those things, you're still growing new neural connections every day. And so if you're telling yourself that, you start by talking about it or thinking about it and then talking about it and then writing it down and then coming up with a plan and all these things. The reason we do it is not because it's more organized. It does seem organized to us, like on the outside, but ultimately what you're doing is creating these new neural connections daily to click it on when it's time to click it on.
Okay, man, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. So, for me personally, there's certain things I do, a process in the morning, and certain books that I read and information. And, and one of the things we talk about on this channel is if information were all that we needed to be happy and successful, then we'd all be happy and successful, because we have literally any piece of information at our fingertips, but that's not the only solution it takes to be able to get to the goals and dreams you have. It takes more than that. And I have a routine and certain things I do every single day, and I've built habits and I've stacked habits, been talking to people like yourself that have helped me along the way. And this stuff is just very, very, very interesting and crazy. So if I value something enough over a period of time, then I can reach my goals. So is it literally that simple?
I think it's that simple, but it takes
within
a lot
reason.
of work. Yeah, I think it's that simple, but it takes a lot of work, so you're constantly challenging your own thoughts, because as we talked about before, there's a chance that the things around you may not be as accepting of what you're trying to do. So even though if we're talking about money, I want to save money, the way that the internet works, the way that maybe even a relationship is, or your family history or whatever, doesn't have that same value. And so you're having to fight even harder than maybe the person who is around someone who doesn't have that, or maybe 200 years ago when it was a little bit easier to save that money that you were obtaining because maybe there was less things attracting your attention to get.
Okay. So if I'm an audience member out there and I go to Mental Maps on Instagram or find your podcast, what are some of the things, am I saying that right? Mental Maps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some of the things that I'm going to see when I go to your page?
So I've got to work on my page more, to be honest. There goes that value system, right? But I think it goes with, we're really always discussing about why the brain gets sick. We work out of a holistic concept so that, all the things from a biological, psychological, social standpoint impact your brain. And so if you can foster these things, you can create that motivation, you can create that change. And ultimately, if you do have any type of mental illness, you can begin to understand that. The difference between health and wellness. Those are the things that we really work through and really talk about on that page and through the podcast. Right now, we're in a 6-part series on why do brains get sick.
Okay. So from a nutrient standpoint. So can you remind me? So the parts of the equation for mental health, right? You mentioned nutrients and the fuel tank of emotions. What can you remind us again? What are those things that somebody needs to be aware of?
Yeah. So I think, no matter what you're doing, I think even myself, I try to use it every day. I know you just talked about your habits as well, but it's all about what are you doing every day to fuel yourself? So if you were to just envision that you wake up every morning and you have a gas tank, and that gas tank is going to decide how far you can go through the day. And so many of us walk into the office on a half a tank of gas because we're just cashed. And so that's the person that's driving down 98. If you're in Santa Rosa Beach, you're yelling, you're screaming, you're ticked off that somebody's cutting you off. Yeah. You get behind a golf cart and you're cussing and you're doing all these things because you're already emotionally cast, and everything you do is a hit to your gas tank. And so how can you fuel yourself on a day? So as you said, you had those habits every morning that prepares you for the day. And then and then the things you do after work prepare you for the day. One of the big things within that, outside of being physically active and moving and reading and challenging your brain, is your nutrients. So are you eating a healthier lifestyle? Not that you've got to be a bodybuilder or somebody that's like eating the cleanest meals in the world, but are you just not eating really bad stuff? And ultimately, are you also eating? There's a vast amount of people who walk out of the door and go to work on an empty stomach. They have no calories. They have no gas in their stomach in the first place to maintain life. And so I think that's a big thing.
Okay. So don't want to segue here, but intermittent fasting, something that I've heard some people talk about. How does that work, and how does that fit to this?
Intermittent fasting is a really cool concept. We know it's very helpful to men. We know it's very helpful for their testosterone. We know it's very good for self-control. So if you're talking about training that value system to be able to say, I'm not going to eat from this time to this time, where people get in trouble with intermittent fasting is they don't eat all the calories they need to eat in that short amount of time. So if I've got an 8-hour window to eat, I better be eating my 2,300 calories in that 8-hour window, or about 2,000 calories or whatever I've got allocated. A lot of times what happens is they're eating 1,000 calories and then, they set up and then they're not eating and then they go in. So the last time they ate was maybe 6 o'clock at night. They're not still going to eat again until maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And now they're running on like 200 to 300 calories.
Okay.
So they didn't eat enough. But yeah, it's a great thing. And to talk about fostering that motivation and self-control, that goes a long way when you're able to challenge that self-control in different ways to grow those new neural connections.
What about hydration? How important is that?
Hydration is imperative. I mean, a gallon of water today is so important just for your overall body. I mean, if you want to be able to have energy, we know that water is the number one energy source for the brain. And so making sure how many people go straight for that energy drink or straight for that coffee when they need energy. I know I'm bad to do that sometimes with the coffee. Yeah, I got one right here. But really, if you just kept yourself hydrated all day long, that's going to be much less needed.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I drink a gallon a day, but I think I drink probably close. Maybe guzzling some water. Get back to the job here. So what else? What else is somebody just wants to be able to learn more about mental health, how the brain works? Are there any type of nutrient sources that you say, hey, this is like the number 1, 2, or 3 like brain food that is powerful?
So we know that the micronutrients that exist in the brain are probably the most important things. So when you're talking about your vitamins, those are very important. So we know fruits are really important for you. The blueberries, the pineapples, the bananas, we know they hold the amino acids and certain vitamin complexes that can be very helpful just for overall neurotransmitter production. So as we were talking about before with dopamine, I need to even have the chemicals in my brain or the nutrients in my brain to even build that. So those are good. So fruits are really important. Your leafy greens, those good veggies, the kale, the arugula, the spinach, those are very, very helpful. And then your good meats, so are you getting good sources of protein every day? Culturally, if that's something you're doing. If not, how are you getting your protein in any other way? I think those are really the focal points of what you're eating. Eggs are probably the greatest brain food ever. They just hold a lot of really awesome nutrients that's very helpful for the brain. So starting out your day with a couple eggs, man, that's a great way to get going. That and a banana is a good way to start.
Okay. Well, what is it in the banana that's powerful?
Banana has an amino acid called tryptophan, and tryptophan is a precursor to a neurochemical called serotonin. So tryptophan sits over here as its own
Ooh.
amino acid, and then it begins to get converted into serotonin, and that serotonin it then hits on these receptors. So they're kind of like parking spots. So they park in these parking spots. That's good for mood. And so if I want my serotonin to work better, I need good tryptophan to create more of it.
Okay, so serotonin is the same field as dopamine. Is that right?
Yeah, great question. So, so you have these really basic, what we call neuromodulators. And so neuromodulators are little bitty chemicals that float around your brain. You have billions of them, if not trillions of them. And so they go and sit in parking spots based on where they're supposed to be in the pathways they're in. And they all hold different functions. I think we try to understand it the best we can, but we really don't know, to be very candid with you. Like we know a lot, but we don't know everything when it comes to those things. But you have dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin and some of those others. But why they're important is that if you can do these things psychologically, if you can do these things with your nutrition, if you can do these things with your habits, if you can do these things with your behaviors, you can make your brain work for you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people, not talking in the world of like mental illness, but if I'm talking like in the world of mental wellness, who don't let their brain work for them. Their brain is actually working against them. And so they fall victim to a lot of poor decisions. They don't save their money, as we're talking about earlier. They're not doing those habits. They're not doing those things because they're not fostering that in their brain.
So, okay. So if I ask this question, open-ended, if I want to maximize my performance, and on this channel we talk about building wealth, and the purpose of building wealth is to be able to build life with the power of choice, to do the things that you want to be able to do. And money and rich and houses and cars and vacations, all this stuff is a vehicle to get something else. What are we after? And for me personally, one of my own purposes is I want to be able to live a life where I can minimize stress and go build a life where I can have the power of choice to go do the things I want to do things I'm passionate about, and help a lot of people along the way, and help my family secure the family and livelihood and all those things, right? And so if that's my goal, it's my passion, you use your job as a vehicle to be able to acquire more money, to be able to do things, to be able to build up, security, I guess you'd say. So if somebody has a goal of being able to build a business and get ahead, generate wealth, what are some of the things that they can do to be able to put themselves in the best position possible to let their brain work for them?
I think, the first thing is just taking care of the vessel that you're in. So taking care of this body. So, getting good sleep, managing that technology around bedtime, making sure you're getting good sleep, you're getting to bed at a decent time, you're ensuring that you're rested in the day, putting good nutrients in it. So not only the mental gas, but the true physical gas. Like, are you putting good nutrients in your body on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm.
And then constantly, gratitude is one of the biggest things. We know that. I mean, it's been talked about in every culture. You could even go into things like in Eastern Asia and other places, like Buddhism is a culture or is a religion that really focuses on gratitude. And if you can grow that, you can find peace in your life. As I was preparing for this, I was looking at different psychologies of money, and there's a great research study done by Mason and colleagues in 2019 that evaluated the subjective and objective perceptions of money. So subjective meaning I have a lot of money, and the perceptions meaning I have what I need. So I perceive that I have money. And they found that people who had a higher perception of their money, independent of how much money you had, you were more likely to save money because the perception you had of your money was better. So having that gratitude, having that perception, being able to find that peace and contentment in your life is going to allow you to be able to save rather than reaching out to the world and obtain that. So sleep, nutrition, move every day, and then gratitude, I think, is a big thing.
Okay, so gratitude. Tell me more about an example and cadence of that.
Yeah, so I think it's the difference between looking at your bank account and saying, "Man, I don't have what Jim has," or being able to say, "Man, I had more money than I had 2 weeks ago," or "I had more money than I had 5 years ago."
Okay.
I've got more money today than I did years ago. And so I'm grateful for that. So not only being able to acknowledge like, hey, I've got more, but being able to say, I'm grateful for this. Like, thank you to whatever being you have for having that.
Okay. So if I say, hey, I'm grateful for this, this is where I'm at. Like I'm better off today than I was yesterday versus, well, shoot, I don't have enough money. Right. So what happens the next day? How does that affect things the next day or the next set of events? What's going on biologically
So I
from the
think it
mind?
goes back to, what we've been talking about for a little bit now of just that value system. So if I wake up in the morning and I feel like I need something, the value I'm going to have on that is I'm looking for something, I'm seeking something. But if I start my day out of a mindset of I have what I need, I'm content in what I have, then everything I'm creating and doing is out of a completely different mindset. It's not out of a survivalist mindset. It's out of a mindset of I'm just content in accruing more. And so I think it really changes how you're going to react, how you're going to respond to those ads that you get on Amazon, how you're going to respond to the people that you interact with in your life, because you now have contentment within your financial situation. Not that you have all the money in the world, but if you're meeting your basic needs, there's contentment in that.
Okay. So so if somebody goes this way of contentment and the opposite way of non-contentment or gratitude, the way you perceive the world is going to be literally different and your actions will be different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because when you think about the person who doesn't have that, has that non-contentment. So let's go back to that study of, let's say I have a poor perception of my financial situation. So even though I have money, I perceive I don't have enough. Yes, that's going to motivate me to do more, but I'm also more likely to fall into these traps and these holes and these hijackings that occur and spend my money because I'm not content with the money that I have. I'm not content with the things that I have. A great analogy I use, living in Santa Rosa Beach, we have just these beautiful homes and all these beautiful things around us. And so it's really easy to get on the water and paddleboard. And instead of looking out at the beauty of the ocean, you're looking at the houses and saying, I want. And that just takes away that contentment that you have. Not that, yeah, you want that. You absolutely want that luxury. You want to get to that place. But if that dominates where you're at, you're going to be more likely to spend more money because you're not going to be content with what you have.
Okay. So we talked about dopamine. Where does serotonin fall into this again? And some of these things, whether it be a gratitude or habits, where does serotonin fall into that?
Serotonin is a really interesting neuromodulator because it does so many different things. And so one of the things about serotonin is that it affects dopamine downstream, and that can get really confusing. But just think of your neural pathways as like a big river. And so serotonin can do something at the head of the river that affects dopamine at the bottom of the river. And so it's just modulating things. So it's going to be better for happiness. It's going to be better for mood. It's going to be better for motivation. We know it's implicated in anxiety and worry and fear. We know those are really big proponents in serotonin. So let's say, for example, I'm very fearful of a lot of things, or I'm worrying about my financial situation on a daily basis. I'm constantly depleting my serotonin system. I'm constantly impacting that system in a way that becomes somewhat dysfunctional.
Okay. So if I'm in this process where I'm trying to, start saving money, I'm trying to build the right habits, trying to focus on putting value on saving money for it to be able to, help me become a vehicle to get to a more higher level of life, more passionate about life, et cetera, et cetera. What are the things that I can do if I'm going down the wrong path? How do I get out of my own way and not spiral down? So if I'm, having a rough day, my fuel tank is empty. You mentioned go for a walk. You mentioned go to find the things that fuel you. But mentally speaking, what are the things that somebody can do to try to stop the spiraling, so to speak?
I think the first thing is just checking in with yourself, like knowing where you're at. Like so many times we walk around life and we don't check in with ourselves, and we're just going through the motions, and we go to work and we clock in and we do what we need to do and we leave and we stay in this perpetual cycle. And so being able to check in and be like, okay, where am I at? Do I need rest? Do I need energy? Do I need social connection? Do I need to move? Do I need some food in my body? And just checking in with yourself. I think the second thing is, when you're talking about savings and money, is first being able to say, what is the most important for you? So is the random thing you're buying on Amazon the most important thing for you, or whatever it is, eBay, whatever, Craigslist? Or is it that you're going to get this house 5 years from now, or you're going to create this business 5 years from now? And so being able to delay that gratification and then have those small wins in the meantime. So setting obtainable objectives in this long-term goal, and then fueling yourself on a daily basis to achieve these objectives, which gets you to your goal.
So if you save $5 every single day and you need to have whatever money, how much money you want for the down payment of a house, and it takes 5 years, right? 5 years down the road. That's hard. Shoot, I can't even think about tomorrow, let alone 5 years from now. So, that type of time frame, I'm not used to thinking that far ahead, and most people are not. So how the heck do you tackle that one when you don't see results for years, at least by the tangible eye?
Well, same thing. I mean, I think I'm the same way. I think we're all the same way. Delaying gratification is one of the hardest things to do. And we live in a society that delaying gratification is probably one of the hardest things we can do as a whole community, because we have so many ways to achieve things so easily. And so I think the biggest thing is to make small objectives that are obtainable. So to say that I need $10,000 right now, that can sound like so overwhelming. Like, how am I going to achieve this? But if I can say, can I save $100 by 6 months from now? And then you do it. And maybe you say you save $110 6 months from now, and then you go do something with that $10. Now, that's a really small way to kind of think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to maybe put a cushion into that money to give yourself a small little gratification after you've achieved what you've achieved. Because some people, we've seen this in like certain situations where, let's say I'm saving $100 in my paycheck and I get to the 6 month mark and I've got $600. Once they get to $600, they're probably just going to blow that money because they're like, oh, I've achieved it. There's this really great research that talks about how our perception of what we think we should save is going to dictate how much we'll actually save. And once we achieve that number, we will always come back to that number. So let's say, for example, I believe I'm worth saving $2,000. If I get to $4,000, I'm going to blow that other $2,000 and go back to the $2,000. And it's a conscious cycle over and over and over, because in your head, you're like, all I needed to do is save 2,000. Had this extra 1,000, I'll just go spend it. So I think it's being able to make the small goals rather than the large goals and constantly trying to level up.
Okay. So one of the things that we talk about here is kind of that natural equilibrium that, I've talked about this many times to groups of people. Let's say that your car breaks down and you don't have the money and you borrow money from somebody and you got to pay them back, and you got to pay back let's just say the same $1,200. And so you say, I'm going to save $200 a month. I'm going to cut this and do some extra overtime here and try to work to pay that person back. And then 6 months that you pay them back. And then many people stop because you did it. It's like, what if you kept doing those actions that got you there? Then you'd be propelling yourself forward. And then if you do, it's uncomfortable as it is down here when you owe somebody money, and then you get up here and you start saving money. Also can be uncomfortable because you're not used to it, and you work your way backwards down. So it's kind of maybe the same thing you're saying here. So
absolutely. And I think in that situation, you're also talking about, like, you had a value, like, I got to pay this guy back. So that value is really important to me. I'm going to pay him back. And so it's like that old quote about motivation of, is it like air you need to breathe? Is it that important to you? It's like, the old analogy of the man that puts his head underwater, and that feeling when you're underwater. Is everything feel that way? Like, can you keep that feeling going? And I think that's important too. Like, can you keep that high value on it, even if you don't owe somebody money?
So if you're not born that way, right? If it's not just naturally, because there's some people that just don't, like a Kobe Bryant. That guy just kept on going. He would not stop. If you look at some of the research and some of the clips, and like him and like a Michael Jordan, obviously they're like some of the greatest players in the league, but they're the greatest because they don't ever stop. Like, you hear stories of Michael Jordan would, go practice, go to the casino and gamble till 4 o'clock in the morning, show up for practice at 9 o'clock or whatever. And then the game at that night, like with no sleep, or he would play golf in the middle of the day and play, 2 rounds of golf in the middle of the day, whatever. It's like, how does somebody physically do that? Right.
I think, the first thing is that, like, we as a society, we idolize that because it seems so hard to do. Not that every man can do it. And I think when we idolize it, we have to remember that not that every man can do it. Those people are very different than us. Not that we can't be extraordinary. We're all extraordinary. They just have some great characteristics about them, but there are side effects. So if you go to like Michael Jordan, for example, he can't just play a regular game for fun. Like he has to win. And he talks about that, like, and it impacts his life greatly because he can't just go out and like play a pickup game of golf. Like he's got to be betting on those holes. He's got to be doing these things. It's all got to matter. And so I think for us, it's being able to say, what quality do we have in us that we can magnify, like he magnified his need to win. He magnified that motivation that was there. So for you, is it your emotional intelligence? Is it maybe your understanding of human beings? Maybe it's your desire to support your family. Maybe it's your desire to get out of that place that you're living in right now. That's what you have to magnify rather than say, oh man, I just got to go as hard as I possibly can go. That's impossible. Not everybody can do that. And the world is riddled with people who just fail, not fail in the world of like you suck as a loser, but you fail as in you didn't achieve your goal because you're just cashed.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the part of, hey, I worked my way out of this hole. I got here because I placed value on that. And now you get to here. And now you have to like figure out a way to be able to put value on something almost manufactured out of thin air to keep yourself going so you can get out of this equilibrium. So how the heck do you do that? Because I've been there and I've tried it and it's not easy. I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's not as much about creating it out of thin air as it's what do I steer hold dear? Like what is part of my value system? So let's say my value system is to have safety in my bank account. And so let's say you've made a goal of like, I need $5,000. If I have $5,000 in my bank account, I feel safe. Like I feel good. Okay. Now that I've achieved that, how do I feel safer? Or what other value is important to me? So maybe it's not only safety, but maybe it's, a good example would be, maybe it's providing. So not only do we have safety for my family, but now I'm providing for my family. So what is it my family needs? Well, maybe we would like to go do more. Maybe like to do these things. So you're using your values to grow in that, to constantly level up, to not say that this is good enough and keep going. Not that you can't find contentment in that. And I know it almost sounds like a paradoxical paradigm, right? That you're in this like world of like, I need to have contentment, but I need more. I need to work harder, but I need to be okay in the moment. And I think that's where we all really struggle. But I think it's finding that middle ground of I'm content, but I'm not doing anything, and I'm motivated, but I'm not so motivated that I don't even appreciate what I have.
Interesting. Yeah. This whole, because then you start talking about work-life, family balance. And, some of the people that I know in the coaching world, it's all about, finding the right season. There's seasons of, hey, I'm going to focus on this task. And sometimes you have to sacrifice, certain things in here. And once I get that season's done, then you kind of reallocate, regroup and where your time goes. And it's like you said, it's a work in progress. It's a back and forth, the paradox, I guess you'd say. So,
well, and I think it's really important. Like you said, coaching, I think those are the things that's important as all as humans is who do we have around us that's helping us do it? If you're out there by yourself, alone in a silo, trying to do this on your own, that's very difficult. But if you've got a good group of people around you, whether you've got a mentor or a coach, or you've got like a figure in your life, or you just have a good community around you that's all pursuing that same goal, it's going to be much easier to keep your mind on the goal rather than just being by yourself and kind of in that silo. So yeah, I mean, seeking out, if you're out there and you're just like, where do I start? Man, reach out to somebody, find someone who do you want? It's like that old adage, you are who you hang out with. And I think that's really important.
So, we're coming up on some time here. Any other topics or things that we should dig into or for next time?
I think one of the things is, we jumped around a lot, but the biggest concept is just, know your values. And if you don't know your values, it's what is important to you. Is it social justice? Is it security? Is it environment? Is it family? Is it, experiences? What is it? And then how can your finances, how can your daily behaviors get you to that goal where you're leaning into your values every day? And I think if you do that, you're going to find a road to wherever you want to go, and then just feel yourself down the road.
Cool. I love it. Well, thanks again so much for making some time out of your crazy schedule for us. At some point I'm gonna have to have you back on and dig into some more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Honored to be here. I mean, I love what you're doing, and the whole concept of just strive for that 25. Like I said, all these things, I need to use it just as much as anybody. And I think it's just, being aware of it, and you do a great job of making people aware. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Josh Waddell in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. Thanks again, and we'll be talking very soon.